I'm gonna die today. I opened my eyes in the dark, and that certainty hit my chest like a hammer blow. At 38 years old, a holistic therapist in Porto Alegre, I never imagined I would wake up with this phrase pounding in my head. It wasn't fear, it wasn't intuition. It was memory. The memory of something that had already happened 2,000 years ago. I got up from bed trembling, ignoring my wife Anna's protests as she still slept. I went straight to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, but the face staring back at me was no longer mine. For 1 second, terrible and crystal clear, I saw another man. A younger man, with sunburned skin, deep scars crossing his bare chest, dark eyes full of a rage I had never felt in my life. The hands gripping the sink were mine, but at the same time, they weren't. They were larger, more calloused, with chain marks on the wrists that didn't exist on my skin. Cold sweat ran down my back as I tried to control my breathing. Anna woke up with the noise and appeared at the bathroom door, sleepy and worried. "Marcus, honey, are you okay?" It's 3 a.m, but I couldn't answer. How could I explain that for the first time in my life I knew, with absolute certainty, what it was to die? Not the abstract idea of death, but the real experience of a blade piercing flesh, blood filling lungs, consciousness slowly fading while 50,000 people applauded. It all started 3 months ago, but I only realized they weren't just dreams when I woke up screaming for the 5th consecutive time. The first time, Anna found me sweating and trembling, muttering words in a language neither of us recognized. The second time, I woke up with my right arm making a perfect circular motion, as if wielding an invisible sword. The third time, Anna found me standing in the backyard at 4 a.m, barefoot on the wet grass, looking at the sky as if expecting to see something that was no longer there. Regression therapy was something I offered to my own clients, but I had never taken it very seriously. I always thought it was more a tool for psychological self-knowledge than something literal. I have a psychology degree from UFRGS, a master's in holistic therapies, over 15 years of clinical experience. I'm rational, skeptical by nature, someone who prefers scientific explanations to mysticism. But when Gabriella, my best friend, and also a therapist, suggested I try a deep session, I was so desperate for answers that I accepted immediately. "I can't believe you're actually considering this." Anna crossed her arms when I told her, that expression she makes when she thinks I'm being ridiculous. "You're a scientist, Marcus. You have a psychology degree. How can you take this past lives story seriously? Have you thought it might just be stress? You're working too much, seeing too many clients, haven't taken a vacation in 2 years." But I couldn't explain. How could I tell someone I love that every time I close my eyes I smell dried blood mixed with hot sand? How could I explain that I hear roars of crowds hungry for violence, that I feel the weight of a sword in my hand even though I've never held a weapon in my life? The first regression session was on a rainy Thursday in August. I was so nervous I almost canceled 3 times. I called Gabriella in the morning with an excuse about an emergency client. I sent a message in the early afternoon saying I was feeling sick. Half an hour before the scheduled time, I was standing in front of her office in the light rain, finger over the intercom, almost pressing it, almost giving up. It was Gabriella who opened the door. "I saw you from the window," she said with that gentle smile she always uses. "Standing there for 10 minutes, debating with yourself. Come in, you're going to get even wetter." She prepared the room with that professional seriousness she always maintains. Aromatherapy diffusers on with lavender and chamomile, low light filtered through heavy curtains, soft music playing in the background, something that sounded like Gregorian chant mixed with nature sounds. Gabriella is 45 years old and has worked with alternative therapies since her 20s. She's seen everything in that office. People reliving childhood traumas, discovering repressed memories, having profound mystical experiences. But something in my gaze made her uneasy. There was an intensity there she rarely saw, a weight that seemed to come from a place much deeper than the modern unconscious. "Let's go slowly," she said in a calm voice as I settled into the brown leather recliner. "If at any moment you want to stop, just raise your right hand. No matter what's happening, you're in control. Understood?" I nodded, already feeling that familiar weight settling in my chest, that sensation that I was about to fall into a hole much deeper than I imagined. She began to induce me into a trance, counting slowly from 10 to 1, asking me to relax each muscle, each tension, each worry of the day. Release your shoulders, Marcus. Let the weight go. Relax your jaw. That's it, just like that. Now your arms, legs, each toe. Imagine you're gently sinking into something soft and safe. Like a cloud, like warm water. Her voice became increasingly distant, like an echo crossing a long tunnel. And then, when she reached number 1, I began to fall. It wasn't like falling asleep. It was like being pulled down, through layers and layers of darkness, each one denser than the last. I could feel centuries passing, decades dissolving like dry leaves in the wind, until suddenly there was light. Too much light. The scorching Roman sun beat down hard on the sand of the Colosseum, and I was standing in the center of the arena. The shock was physical. It wasn't like watching a movie or having a distant vision. I was there, completely immersed in that body, in that moment, in that life. I felt every grain of sand sticking to my sweaty skin, every fiber of tensed muscle, every accelerated heartbeat. The smell was overwhelming. Blood, sweat, urine, fear. The stench of a human slaughterhouse operating at maximum capacity. My name was different there, Caius Maximus. The knowledge was simply there, as if it had always been part of me. Gladiator from the school of Lentulus Batiatus, winner of 62 combats, known as the Black Raven because of how I attacked my prey. Fast, deadly, always aimed at the opponent's eyes. I knew things I shouldn't know. I knew I had been captured in a Roman raid in Germania when I was 19. I knew my family had been massacred in front of me before being chained and sold. I knew that for the last 13 years, that hell of sand and blood had been my only home. The crowd roared. I raised my eyes to the stands, and the visual impact almost knocked me down. There were over 50,000 people crammed into the white marble stands, each row rising higher than the last until lost against the blue and implacable Roman sky. All screaming, betting, delirious with every drop of blood spilled on the sand. They weren't individual faces. They were a single thirsty mass, a creature composed of 50,000 mouths hungry for violence. I could feel every detail with a clarity that terrified me. The weight of the reinforced leather armor, tanned and hardened until it was almost like wood, unevenly distributed over my shoulders because the left side was more worn. The strips of dirty cloth tied around my forearms, wrapped dozens of times to protect my wrists from sprains. The rough texture of the gladius handle, worn by so many hands over the years that it formed perfect grooves for fingers. The short, deadly sword I had used to kill so many men I had lost count after the 20th combat. Today was different. I felt it in the air, in the way the guards looked at me with a mixture of pity and excitement. Today was the big event of the year, the celebrations for Emperor Marcus Aurelius's anniversary. The best gladiators from all schools had been gathered. The bloodiest combats had been scheduled. The Roman people expected spectacle, and spectacle is what they would receive. And I had been chosen for the final combat, the fight that would close the games with a flourish. It was an honor, theoretically. The most anticipated combat, with the biggest bets in front of the emperor himself. Gladiators spent their entire lives dreaming of such recognition. But I felt icy terror freeze my blood when my opponent was announced. My stomach churned, acid rising in my throat. Quintus. I heard the name echo through the arena, shouted by the heralds, repeated by the crowd in chorus. Quintus of Numidia, the Golden Lion, specialist in net and trident, winner of 47 combats, and now entering to face me in today's great event. The crowd exploded in shouts of approval. Two living legends, finally facing each other. Bets were already being adjusted, money changing hands at frenetic speed. I saw when Quintus entered the arena from the other side. I recognized his walk before seeing his face. That specific way of stepping, slightly leaning to the left because of an old hip injury. And then our eyes met across the 50 yards separating us, and I felt my stomach turn. It was Quintus, My best friend for the last 5 years of forced slavery as a gladiator. No, I heard my own voice, but it wasn't my voice. It was deeper, laden with an accent I didn't recognize, words in Latin I didn't know I knew but came out naturally. I won't fight him. Not after everything we've been through together. The lanista, the trainer who owned the gladiators, was outside the arena in a special tribune, protected by a bronze grate. Lentulus Batiatus himself. I could see him with perfect clarity, every detail etched in my 2,000-year-old memory. The fat, sweaty face, skin reddened from too much wine, gold rings on fingers stained with food, the cruel smile that never touched his eyes. "You will, Raven," he said, loud enough for the guards to hear but too low for the crowd. "Or you both die before the sun sets. The choice is yours. Do you want to make your friend die impaled and agonizing because you decided to have scruples now?" I could see every detail of that man. The way he chewed grapes while deciding men's fates. The special ring on his index finger with his gladiator school symbol. The wine stain on the white tunic he didn't even bother to clean, because tunics were disposable when you had so much money. Batiatus was one of the richest men in Rome, having made his fortune transforming war prisoners into killing machines for mass entertainment. The emperor was in the imperial tribune, directly in front of the arena. Marcus Aurelius himself, the philosopher emperor, the man who preached stoic virtue and wisdom in his writings. And there he was, surrounded by senators and Roman nobles, calmly watching, while men were forced to kill each other for his entertainment. I felt rage burning in my chest, an ancient and deep rage that seemed bottomless. It was more than individual anger. It was accumulated rage from 13 years of slavery, of being treated like an animal, of seeing friends killed for sport. Quintus approached from the other side of the arena. He was younger than me, maybe 25, muscular and quick as a leopard. His skin was darker, burned by the North African sun before being brought to Rome. Short, curly hair, eyes that had once been full of hope but now carried the same emptiness I saw in my own reflection. We had trained together hundreds of times in the ludus, the gladiator school. We shared miserable meals of barley and poorly cooked vegetables. We shared wounds, each one stitching the other's cuts with needle and thick thread. We shared nighttime fears, when memories of our previous lives haunted us and only another human being's presence kept us from going completely mad. We had planned together, in whispers late at night when the guards slept, how we would buy our freedom someday. Quintus had a sister, Claudia. I suddenly remembered her. He talked about her constantly, how she had escaped capture and managed to establish herself in Ostia, Rome's port, working for an olive oil merchant. How he sent all the money he could save from arena victories to her. How his only dream was to gather enough to buy his freedom and join her. "Forgive me, brother." I heard the words coming from Quintus's lips, too low for the crowd to hear. "Take care of my sister if you survive. She lives in Ostia, at the olive oil merchant's house near the port, the one with the blue painted door. Don't let her be alone." "No," I shook my head violently. "We'll find another way. We can refuse to fight. Let them kill us together." Quintus's sad smile said everything. I could see resignation in his eyes. "But at least this way one of us can live. And if it's you, brother, you can honor both of us. You can live the life I won't have. You can find my sister and tell her I died thinking of her. Fight, Caius. Fight for real. Fight as I taught you. Win for both of us." The tuba sounded, the signal for combat to begin. The crowd exploded in even louder shouts. I could hear every voice, as if I had a god's ears. I heard men shouting bets. I heard women sighing when we removed our ceremonial capes, revealing muscular, scarred bodies. I heard children, because yes, there were children there, learning from an early age that violence was entertainment. 50,000 people thirsty for blood. To them, Quintus and I weren't human. We were trained animals to kill, Pieces in a deadly game, investments that provided returns in the form of cheap emotion. Some rooted for me because I was the favorite. Others rooted for Quintus because they bet on him as the underdog. No one cared that we were friends. No one cared that we were humans with dreams and fears. We began circling each other, unhurried. The unwritten rules of the arena said we should put on a spectacle before the blood. Give time for bets to be adjusted, for tension to build. Quintus spun the net with precision, that hypnotic circular movement he had perfected over dozens of combats. I calculated each movement instinctively. I kept my sword low, shield raised, calculating each step. The sand was hot under my bare feet, sticky in some spots where blood from earlier combats still hadn't completely dried. The smell was unbearable, a mixture of sweat, iron, death, and fear. It was the arena smell, unique and terrible. The first attack came from Quintus. The net flew through the air, and I felt my reflexes kick in without thinking. I rolled to the side, the hot sand burning my bare back for a second. The net passed close to my head. Quintus was already pulling it back, recovering the net in less than 3 seconds, preparing another throw. We fought in slow motion and extreme speed at the same time. For the crowd, it was frenetic action. For us, each second stretched, each movement being calculated 3 steps ahead. We had trained so much together we practically knew what the other would do before it happened. Each blow was calibrated to seem real but miss by inches. The net flew, I dodged. The sword cut, Quintus retreated. The trident thrust, I blocked with the shield. But the crowd wasn't stupid. After 15 minutes of fighting without serious blood, the shouts began to change. "Fight for real," someone shouted. The emperor leaned forward, frowning. I saw the lanista gesticulating furiously. That's when I noticed the archers. They appeared at the upper edges of the arena, at least 6 of them, all with long bows and arrows already nocked. And the most terrible thing? The arrows weren't aimed at us. They were aimed at specific points in the stands. That's when I understood. My blood froze. Batiatus had planned everything. If we didn't fight for real, he would have people killed in the stands as punishment. And I suddenly knew exactly who was being targeted. Quintus's sister was there. I turned my head, searching. And then I saw her. Claudia, sitting in a specific section, surrounded by discreet guards. She had the same face as Quintus, the same dark eyes, the same expression of terror. One of the archers slightly moved his bow, aiming directly at her. The message was clear. Fight for real, or she dies. Quintus saw it at the same instant. I watched the exact moment when something broke inside my friend. It was physical, visible. His shoulders fell, his eyes darkened. When the net flew again, it wasn't to miss. I felt the change in the air. The trident's point tore my left eye, drawing a scream from the crowd. And I screamed too, because the pain was real, absolute. The metal point tore the flesh, cut through muscle, scraped against bone. Hot blood poured down my leg. The arena exploded in jubilation. Finally, real blood! I staggered, vision blurring at the edges. But something worse began to grow inside me. The survival instinct forged in 13 years of kill or die. My body knew what to do. It didn't matter that it was Quintus in front of me. The body knew only one thing: survive. My arm moved before my mind could process. I spun, the sword cutting the air in a perfect, deadly arc. Quintus tried to retreat but slipped on the bloodied sand. The gladius caught his right arm just above the elbow, cutting deep. His cry of pain echoed through the arena. Blood spurted in rhythmic pulses. The crowd was ecstatic. No, no, no. I was screaming inside, but my body kept fighting. Our bodies now moved with lethal intent, all previous theatricality abandoned. Quintus attacked with the net again. This time he managed to trap my feet. I fell backwards, the impact against the hard sand expelling all air from my lungs. Quintus was on top of me in seconds. The trident rose above my head. I saw his eyes up close. There were tears streaming down his dirty face. "Forgive me, brother," he whispered. "It's the only way to save Claudia." But I was faster. 13 years in the arena had etched reflexes that operated below the level of conscious thought. I rolled at the last second, cut the net with my sword, freeing my feet, and then I kicked Quintus in the chest with both feet. The fight continued. Now it was about killing or dying. We had crossed that invisible line where humanity gives way to animal. We fought with everything we had. The sand turned dark with our mixed blood. We were both bleeding from multiple wounds, a cut above my eye, making blood drip into my vision, a deep gash in Quintus's thigh, making him limp. The fight lasted another terrible 20 minutes, each second stretched for an eternity. Both covered in wounds, exhausted, moving now by willpower rather than physical strength. The crowd was in absolute ecstasy. I could feel every cut, every bruise, exhaustion burning in my muscles like acid, lungs burning with each breath. It was Quintus who made the fatal mistake. He attacked with too much force, betting everything on one last attack. I dodged by pure muscle memory, and when Quintus passed by me, off balance, my gladius found its target. The blade entered from the side, piercing between the ribs, seeking the heart. I felt the resistance of flesh, the exact moment when steel met the vital organ. Quintus stopped. His entire body froze, and then he slowly turned. The sword was still buried in his chest. His eyes met mine. There was no anger, there was no fear, there was only relief. And gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, blood bubbling on his lips. "You freed me, brother. Take care of her, please. Take care of Claudia." And then he smiled. That sad and beautiful smile. "Until we meet again, Black Raven, in the next life, we'll be free." And then he fell. Quintus's body hit the sand with a muffled sound I know I'll never forget. His eyes remained open, looking at the sky but seeing nothing more. The gladius was still buried in his chest. The crowd exploded. 50,000 people standing, applauding so hard the sound echoed like thunder, shouting my name until they were hoarse. Celebrating. I turned and vomited in the sand. My stomach contracted violently. I fell to my knees beside Quintus's body, not caring about anything. I looked up to the imperial tribune. Marcus Aurelius was standing, smiling, waving in approval. The philosopher emperor, satisfied with the spectacle. Beside him, senators laughed and celebrated their winning bets. And that was it. That specific moment. I felt something break in me. It wasn't a crack. It was a complete and irreversible destruction of something fundamental in my soul. I stood up slowly. The crowd expected me to turn to the emperor, raise my sword and salute, accept the glory of victory. I turned to Marcus Aurelius. Our eyes met. And then, deliberately, I simply dropped the sword. The gladius fell on the sand with a dull thud. The entire Colosseum fell silent. It was an unthinkable act of defiance. To refuse glory. To refuse the emperor's honor. I knelt beside Quintus's body. I took my friend's cold hand, intertwined our fingers, and I began to cry. In front of 50,000 people, the emperor of Rome, I cried openly for my brother's death. Deep sobs that shook my entire body. "Forgive me," I whispered to the inert body. "Forgive me, brother. I didn't want to. You know I didn't want to. But they didn't let us choose." The crowd began to murmur. I saw the guards already moving, but I didn't care anymore. There was a strange peace in having finally defied, and having finally said no. That's when the arrows came. I didn't see who gave the order. The first arrow hit me in the back. The iron point pierced my left lung. I felt air escape my chest in a wet hiss. Blood filled my mouth, taste of copper and death. The second arrow caught my neck. It tore through my trachea, cut the carotid artery. I fell onto Quintus's body, our hands still intertwined. And as consciousness began to slip away, the last thing I felt was gratitude. gratitude, because finally, after 13 years, I was free. My last vision was of Rome's blue sky, clear and indifferent, some clouds passing, a bird of prey circling high. My last thoughts were of rage, rage at the injustice of everything. And then, everything went dark. "Marcus! Marcus! Marcus!" I woke up screaming in Gabriella's chair. I was drenched in sweat, every muscle trembling. Her hands held my shoulders. "You're here. You're safe," she repeated like a mantra. "You're in Porto Alegre, year 2024. You're Marcus Silveira." But I couldn't process. The memories were so vivid, so real. I killed my best friend. The words came out broken. I killed him in front of thousands of people. And they applauded. I bent over myself, sobbing so violently that Gabriella was genuinely worried. It took 15 minutes for me to breathe normally. Gabriella brought water, a blanket, stayed by my side without saying anything. When I finally could look at her, I saw there were tears in her eyes too. "How do you feel?" she asked. But I couldn't answer. It was too big, too deep, too terrible. The next 2 months were the hardest of my life. The memories didn't stop. They came in flashes during the day. I was seeing a client and suddenly felt the sword in my hand. I was having dinner with Anna and suddenly smelled bloodied sand. I was driving and had to pull over because my vision filled with faces screaming for blood. Anna was increasingly desperate. "You need to see a psychiatrist," she begged. "This isn't normal, Marcus." But I knew it wasn't madness. It was memory. As real as memories of my own childhood. I started researching obsessively. I spent nights awake browsing digital libraries, academic articles, historical records. And I found things I shouldn't know. I discovered there really had been a gladiator named Caius Maximus in records from the 2nd century AD. I found references to Marcus Aurelius's anniversary games in 174 AD. I even found a mention of an incident where a gladiator had refused to honor the emperor after a victory and was executed. The details were scarce, but it was there. It was real. "How do I know this?" I asked Gabriella in another session. "How can I know specific details about ancient Rome that I didn't study?" She had no answers. "Some say they're ancestral memories," she offered. "And you? What do you think it is?" "I think I lived it," I answered simply. "I think I was Caius. And I think I died in that arena 2,000 years ago." It was Gabriella who suggested forgiveness therapy. Even if they're real past life memories or mind constructions, they're affecting you now. You need to make peace with it. The second regression was different. I entered it with a purpose, not to relive, but to heal. I saw myself again in the arena, but now as an observer, floating above the scene. I saw Caius kneeling beside Quintus, both still alive, in those last seconds before the arrows. I descended, my spiritual form taking solidity. Caius noticed me, eyes wide. "Who are you?" "I'm you," I answered. 2,000 years in the future. "I came to say I understand. That you had no choice. Did you come to torture me with the future?" Caius asked bitterly. "No, I knelt beside him. I came to say you were a victim, not a villain." "But I wielded the sword," he cried. "I killed him with my own hands." "Yes," I nodded, "and that will haunt you for 2,000 years. But killing Quintus was the most loving act you could have done in that moment." Quintus was also there now, standing between us, smiling. "He was always too dumb to understand," Quintus said. "When I asked you to fight for real, it wasn't because I wanted to die. It was because I wanted one of us to survive." "I died in peace, brother. Be free," Quintus said, touching our foreheads. "Both of you. Tell our story. Make people understand what really happened in those arenas. Not glorious entertainment, systemic horror." I woke from the second regression different. Tears still came, but they were of relief, of understanding. The weight I carried had dissolved. The memories were still there, but they didn't destroy me anymore. "How do you feel?" Gabriella asked. "Light," I answered. "For the first time in months, I feel I can breathe." That night, I finally told Anna everything. The whole story, every detail. It took hours. Anna listened in silence. "I don't know if I believe in reincarnation," she said when I finished, "but I believe something profound happened to you." "And what are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell the story," I answered. "I'm going to write about Caius and Quintus, so their lives aren't just tragedy." In the following months, I returned to work with new perspective. I continued offering regression therapy, but now with deep respect for the process. I knew it didn't matter if memories were literally real. What mattered was what the person did with them. Months later, something impossible happened. I was seeing a new client, a 40-year-old businessman named Raphael. He mentioned he'd had spontaneous regressions. "Very vivid dreams," he explained. "Can you tell me about them?" I asked. "I see myself in ancient Rome," he began. "I'm a merchant. I sell olive oil at a port. I have a sister that—" His voice broke. "I loved her more than anything. She died young." My heart raced. "How did she die?" "It's connected to her brother." Raphael wiped his eyes. "He was killed as a gladiator. She was watching. When he died, something in her broke. She stopped eating. Within a few weeks she was dead. Died of a broken heart. I could barely breathe." "What was her brother's name?" Raphael looked confused. "Quintus," he finally said, "and she was Claudia." For a few seconds I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face. Raphael was alarmed. "Are you okay?" "Why are you crying?" That's when I understood. The circle was closing. Quintus had asked me to take care of Claudia, and now, 2,000 years later, I could fulfill that promise by helping Raphael process his own pain. The months of therapy with Raphael were transformative for both of us. Through regressions, we explored those ancient lives. Raphael relived Claudia's death, and I shared my own memories of Caius and Quintus. Together, we wove a complete narrative. "There was nothing to forgive," Raphael whispered in one of the sessions. "My brother died as a free man in his heart. That's more than most get." The rest of my life was marked by that experience. I wrote a book about regression and trauma. Memories Through Time, Healing Ancient Wounds was published 3 years later. It wasn't dry academic text. It was honest narrative, mixed with deep reflection. I gave lectures at international conferences. There was always someone in the audience who approached afterward with tears in their eyes, saying, "I also remember things I shouldn't know. Thank you for saying I'm not crazy." I never categorically claimed reincarnation was real, but I also never denied it, because in the end, emotional truth mattered more. Caius and Quintus had existed. Their story would be remembered as testimony to the human capacity to love even when everything conspires to turn us into monsters. I lived to 83. I had a good life. I helped hundreds of clients. I wrote 4 books. In the end, lying on my deathbed surrounded by family, Anna holding one of my hands and our 3 children holding the other, I closed my eyes and for the last time felt hot sand under my feet. I saw Quintus waiting for me, no longer covered in blood. I saw Caius too, no longer carrying guilt. "Took you long enough, friend," Quintus said with that smile. "But finally it's time to go home." "Home?" I asked. "Where is home for souls like us?" "Where it's always been." Caius extended his hand. "A place where there are no arenas, no empire, no systems forcing impossible choices. A place where we can just be friends, without chains." I took that hand and finally rested. There was no more arena, no more blood, No more crowds. Just three brothers, reunited after millennia, walking together to whatever came next. Our story didn't save the world. It didn't change the course of history. But it changed me, changed Raphael, changed everyone who heard that even in the deepest hell, humanity can survive if we choose love, that loyalty is stronger than empires, and that some souls are so intertwined that not even death, nor time, nor 2,000 years can completely break the connection. And this is my story. Marcus Silveira, therapist from Porto Alegre who discovered he had been Caius Maximus, Gladiator of Rome. A story about trauma that crosses time, about forgiveness that takes lifetimes to flourish, about friendship so deep that not even millennia can erase. A story that proves some wounds take more than one life to heal, but that eventually, with love and understanding, even the worst pains can transform into wisdom, into peace, and finally, into freedom.